What's cracking, everyone? My name is Ryan, and today we're going to be taking a look at the 7Hz and Crinacle collaboration, the Zero 2. Now, this is obviously a follow-up to the 7Hz Salnotes Zero that was released last year. And before we get into this, I do want to send a big thank you to Linsol, who did provide me with the Zero 2 in exchange for all of my thoughts, all of my opinions, which of course, guys, are of my own. So the Zero 2 retails in at $24.99. Now, to put that in perspective, the OG Zero retailed in at $25.99. So let's just call these 25 bucks. Differences between the two of them are not very many. This is an updated driver technology inside of this IEM, and it does have an updated cable. Outside of that, everything else is pretty much the same for the most part. Now, that driver technology I'm talking about, it is a 10 millimeter dynamic driver. It is 32 ohms of impedance and 108 dB of sensitivity, which actually the sensitivity and impedance does match the OG Zero as well. But they did tune this differently to give it a dB boost in that sub-bass region. And we're definitely going to talk about that when we compare the two and get into sound. Now, aesthetically, a lot of things are pretty similar in this. It's a light plastic shell. It's got a plastic faceplate on it as well. It says Zero 2 on it. The OG one said Salnotes Zero on it. Pretty similar there. You do get some different flavors of tips. They are, different sizes, different colors. Kind of like that. It kind of flavors things up a little bit on the IM. And then the cable. To be honest, guys, on my original video of the Salnotes Zero, I was way too nice about the cable. It is a jank cable on the OG Zero. This one's much better. It is not super better or super great, or those are terrible words to describe it, but it is good. It's serviceable, especially for 25 bucks. I am good with the cable update they did with this and with the driver update they did with this to give you a little bit flavorful sound. Again, talk about that in sound. Fit and comfort wise, I gotta say, this fits really well in my ear. It's sealed really well. You get multiple sizes of tips, as I said, just like the OG Zero, and this doesn't go super deep into the canal, which I kind of appreciate. It's not, anything that's too intrusive or digging in there. If that's something that's going to bother you with the IEMs. I do want to say that since you do not get a bag inside of the box, I actually just use this. This is actually a Cost Porta Pro bag. I think they're 10 bucks off cost. Now, I'm not trying to promote that or anything. I'm just telling you that it is a good idea to at least give yourself a case or something to put your IEMs in. So, when you're taking them on the go, something I definitely recommend. All right, so and before I get into sound, one thing I do want to note is what I use these on mostly was my Cayin RU7 for my, dongle DAC solution. I love the Cayin RU7. It sounded great with this IM. I do have to tell you, this does pair right up with a phone or a laptop. You can plug it right in. You're not going to have any problem. I also use my IFI Uno, which is just a $70 little portable amp DAC to use as well. I really enjoy the sound of the RU7 because it is a very clinical sound. And if you have something that is a little more on the clinical nature, I think it pairs up really well with this IM, in my opinion. Now, obviously, mileage is going to vary there, especially with this price point. You're not expected to get something crazy expensive. Just a little 2 cents I'm going to put in there on that. All right. Now, let's go ahead and move on and talk about sound. Hey, everyone. I'm just about to hit my 2,000 subscriber goal, and now my 2024 resolution is to hit 5,000 by the end of the year. So please join the channel, subscribe, like the videos. I would highly appreciate that. And I now have a Patreon if you'd like to join me there and support the channel as well. I would highly appreciate it. I appreciate all of you. And back to the video. All right, so obviously this is a video on the Zero 2, but the Zero 1 or the OG Zero is very relevant in this conversation. So is this really a conversation? I guess it is. I mean, you're not talking to me, but I'm talking to you. So I'm going to basically take you through the sound of this IEM while talking about the OG Zero so that we don't have to backtrack through that. So this IEM definitely has a much bigger emphasis on the sub-bass and bass region than the OG Zero, and it doesn't have as big of an emphasis into the treble region as the OG Zero. The OG Zero is more of a neutralish tuning, I'd say, that does tilt with a little bit of bass to it, and a little bit of bass to it. You get what I'm saying. And this one tilts a little on the warm nature of things. So it doesn't have a lot of treble energy going on. It's definitely not a dark tuning, but let's go ahead and go further into that. Let's start with that bass response first. So with the bass response, as I said, this has a 3 dB boost in the sub bass that definitely feels like more than that. There is a rumble with this IM that you do not get with the OG0, and that is a definite thing. Now, when I listened to a track, it was called Human by Sebdeliza. I had to look because I probably still butchered that name. But this was a really good track to sample that because there's instant sub bass on this that just rumbles right away and really just fills up and thickens up and has a lot of body and texture to it on the low end for this IEM. But the nice part about that is there are vocals that really come through on this particular track, and that sub bass doesn't interrupt it and it doesn't muddy up her vocals at all. And they're the kind of vocals that are heard on both sides. There's a lot of reverb and, effects going on in this track. And it's a fun listen on that track with this IM. Now on the OG, you don't get that big rumble of that low end. And I would tell you that the vocals are a little bit more prominent there as well. And you get a little bit, tiny little bit more clarity. And we'll talk about that more as we progress through the sound. Now the mid bass into the upper bass of the 02 actually don't lose out quite a bit. There's not any kind of a super big bass tuck or anything. So it still gives you some good presence. It's just not as much of that rumble. So it's not boomy in any way, I would say, as you get into that upper bass. So now let's go ahead. We'll talk about mid-range next. The way I know how to describe the mid-range for the 02 is there's a lushness to it on the mid-range. It is definitely more melodic. It's, definitely very musical. Whereas on the OG0, I would call it more vibrant than musical. That kind of makes sense. And to give you another track example of what I'm talking about there, Friday Film Special by Go-Go Penguins. Now, the reason I bring up this track, there's a lot of instruments going on here. And this IM, to be fair, even on the OG0, it's not going to keep up with the resolution and with the instrument separation and things. Either of these aren't going to be able to do that in this price range. But I will tell you that the OG0 does a little bit of a better job of letting you, at least pick apart the instruments a little more because there's a little bit more clarity of that mid-range. But that smoothness of that mid-range on this, make no mistake, it makes it a fun listen on the mid-range. And I definitely heard that on rock and roll music, on, pretty much any genre of music that just has a lot of fun and engagement to it. If they were on a high-end level, I would say the 0 is more analytical. And like I said, this one is more fun and musical. Fun being very subjective. I get that. Now let's go ahead and talk about treble. And so talking about that with the 02, I will tell you that there is softness to the treble. It is definitely not dark, but it is a little bit of a warm tilt. But there's enough details there as well that there are some times that you're going to pick up a tiny bit of sibilance, but it's a tasting. It's kind of like if you're doing, whiskey or wine tasting. It's like those little notes of flavors. Well, there's that little notes of sibilance that you can still get with the 02. Now, comparing that to the OG0, the OG0 is definitely a little bit more aggressive into that treble region, and it is brighter. You are going to pick up sibilance a little bit easier. I don't call it terribly bright of an IEM like I would compare it to, something like the Kiwi Ears Forteza that I just talked about. It's not like that, but it just has more of a brighter tonality to the treble on the OG compared to this one. This IEM, I would say, is not going to be probably as fun for somebody that really is into classical music, because string instruments especially is what I noticed that on, where I didn't pick up quite as much of those fine little details of the string instruments or cymbals or things like that. When we talk about rock and roll music, you don't hear those splashes quite as prominent as you would on the OG0, but that's what, again, makes this more of a pleasing and just harmonious sound overall. Now, to give you a track example, there is a track called Region by Florian Christie. This track has exactly what I'm talking about. There is a piano in this that is honestly very prominent on both IEMs. And there's also some string, classical music that's going on through this track as well. And this was a track I preferred on the OG0, just because I got a little bit more of those details there to make that track a little bit more engaging compared to the 02, which still sounded good. It was still a smooth listen, but if I wanted to like really focus in on that kind of genre, I would probably do that on the OG Zero. And so that's kind of where I lie with the Treble, is like this one I think is going to cater to multiple genres of music, probably not as well on classical. If you are a classical music fan, lover, enthusiast, whatever, but you know, the OG Zero, I think, is where that's going to fit them, or fit you, fit me. I don't know. It's going to fit somebody that's really into classical, I think, with the OG Zero. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and wrap up my thoughts on this. All right, so my take is if you're looking for a budget IM that's got good clarity into the mid-range, still has a nice low end to it, and sparkles a little bit into the treble, the Salnotes Zero is always going to make a recommendation for me. But now we've got the Zero 2 that if you're looking for more of a fun flavored, you like some rock and roll music, hip hop, EDM, things like that, you want some thump to your jump. I tried. The Zero 2 definitely makes a recommendation. It is going to be a little bit softened up in the treble. So again, classical fans may want to think twice about this one. But now we got options, guys. And options are good. All right. Hopefully you enjoyed that video. If so, please smash the like button. And if you haven't done so already, guys, please subscribe to the channel because I got some exciting things coming up that I will be releasing to you very, very soon. I thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.